Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Schulenberg with the NGWA. I'm the Director of Partner States, and I want to talk to you this morning about PFAS. And the title of this presentation is called Educating the Contractor and Customer. What I want to do is have a discussion on PFAS, the role of the contractor, you, as well as your association, and how to try and best understand it. Again, my name is Dave Schulenberg, the Director of Partner States for the National Groundwater Association. In my role, I oversee 9 state water well drilling associations. Those states are Minnesota, Michigan, Montana, Oregon, California, New Mexico, Kansas, Illinois, and Kentucky. So I want to talk a little bit about the overview of the PFAS problem. What is PFAS? What water well contractors need to know, what consumers need to know, what the role of your state association is, and then leave you with some key takeaways as well as some contact information. So let's get started, shall we? Why should we care about PFAS? You'll see this individual a couple of times because it really boils down to we have to figure out what it is, why we should care about it, because believe it or not, it does affect each and every one of us. One thing is that we all agree on is that without water, there is no life because there is no coffee. And I'm sure each and every one of you this morning are enjoying a cup of coffee as you listen to this and partake with your association meeting. From a big look, a big 50,000 foot look, this map shows you a list of where PFAS contamination has been found in the country. Keep in mind as you look at an image like this, you'll see someplace like New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, even Minnesota, Michigan, that there looks like there is no place that there is fresh water, that everything is contaminated. But these are data dots from drinking water that are above proposed limits to military sites, as well as other known sites, and even where there is below the proposed limit. This is just where PFAS has been looked for and has been found. Some other overviews I want to touch base on. You need to remember that you and your association are the groundwater professionals in your state. You should be the resource for questions about groundwater because groundwater is your domain, and never forget that. Every state has resources. I'm going to touch a little bit about where you can find these at NGWA, as well as what you can find regarding PFAS documents. NGWA has been leading the industry on putting together PFAS documentation, whether it's FAQs or top 10 facts about PFAS, what you can use as a homeowner checklist when you're talking about it. Presentations such as this or from individuals such as Seth Kellogg are always good bits of information, but some of these one-pagers that you'll see here that we and others on the team have developed are really just additional tools in your toolbox. Bits of information you want to know about, as well as be able to have on hand to educate your customers as well as your employees. So things such as PFAS risk communication for contractors, PFAS and private well owners, what it is that you want to be able to best understand and share with them. Some top 10 facts about PFAS that as you go through, you're going to want to understand as well, and what PFAS in your water system is going to look like. So again, these are tools in your toolbox, along with wrenches, putty, duct tape, bentonite, you name it. This is something that you should have and be aware of. I want to share this image with you all because as a groundwater professional, whether you are in West Virginia, Virginia, Utah, Colorado, North, South Dakota, wherever you are in the state, as in a state or in the country, you will be able to get groundwater. As a groundwater professional, you understand the verbiage that's talked about, you understand the conversation. It takes you a very minimal amount of time to get up to speed where you'll be able to find water, how to find it, and understand it. So again, remember, being the groundwater professionals you are. I keep reiterating this as a groundwater professional because we need to continue elevating ourselves within our industry. Here's a list of skilled trades, and you'll see up in there, well driller. You are a skilled trade. The information that you need to know and understand is many. What does it take to be a well professional? Take a look through this list, and you will see everything that you have to know to be a skilled trade and a groundwater professional, a water well professional. From geology to accounting, you have to understand it. Permits, insurance, drill rig operations, license renewals, hydrology, geology, plumbing, everything makes up a well professional, a groundwater professional. So everything starts with some sort of regulation. And within our industry, PFAS is the same. For a long time and forever, this is going to start at the federal level. Originally, the PFAS exposure limits, the HAL, the health advisory level, was at 70 parts per trillion. This was back in 2016 that the EPA set this. In June of 22, that changed. It got a lot tighter. The maximum containment level became 4 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS. And other ones, Gen X chemicals and some of the other strains of PFAS were set at 10 parts. Again, here's how this looks right now. Excuse me. PFOA, PFOS, and some of the other ones, again, are at 4 parts per trillion. This is as of 2022. Where this is going to go is ever evolving as new administrations come in and new EPA oversight is taken care of. States, your state, other states, the states that you work in are going to have to evaluate what these MCLs are on their own, and they will often vary. For example, concentrations from 0.0079 parts per trillion is in Minnesota to 400,000 parts per trillion in Michigan. Depending on the PFAS compounds, the nature of the regulation, and the state's determination as to which levels may result in health effects. These are the types of things that when you're talking about PFAS, we have to understand and we have to be able to work through as well as communicate to our customers. States have, as I said, various drinking water regulations. This image here shares a little bit of that, where states have adopted a standard equal to 70 parts per trillion. Wisconsin, New Mexico, Alaska. Some states have adopted a standard higher than 70 parts per trillion, such as the Maryland area. Then others have made a combination depending on what it is that they're regulating, while the New England states have adopted a standard lower than 70 parts per trillion. And you can see a number of states have not regulated PFAS in drinking water at all, and that's a majority of the country. So why do these vary from state to state? The states may choose to set a lower standard value for PFAS, and as science and testing technology evolves, they allow values to decrease. Some PFAS with a longer chemical chains are highly bioaccumulative, meaning parts per trillion in water equals parts per billion in blood, as well as intake rates for infants is much higher, even at lower exposure rates. So these are going to figure in to why these variation on values change, why there is that valuation. Going back to infants, the transfer rate of PFOA, for example, has been found to be between 60 to 200% through the placenta, as well as it can be transmitted through breast milk. So where did we find it? Where is it in our cycle? We've all heard of the hydrologic cycle, but believe it or not, there is a PFAS cycle. And you'll see that on this image here, On the left, as you look at it, PFAS producing or using industries will use wastewater to water treatment plants, directly discharge it into streams, spread it on the ground. It can go into the atmosphere through industrial waste into the landfill. And a lot of the times it's been used as sludge for being able to be spread on crops and such. It's discharged directly to the stream, directly to the groundwater. It then infiltrates the groundwater and plant uptake, crops, irrigation. It gets into our drinking water. There's treated material in our homes, food packaging. So just what is PFAS? We're going to talk a little bit about that. So large classes of surfactants with unique chemical and physical properties that make some of them, like PFOA and PFOS, extremely resistant to breakdown and mobile use in the environment. Developed around the 40s in wide range of consumer industrial applications, it's been used as key ingredients in Scotchgard, textiles, wax, polishes, paints, varnishes, Teflon, Scotchgard, baking paper, food packaging. All of these are um, examples of either products or uses that PFAS, PFOA, PFOS have been used in, because they are a stain in a grease resistant type of product. It's been used in food packaging. You can find it in your cosmetics, paper cups, clothing, Post-it notes, Sharpies, Gore-Tex, waterproofing materials. So it has a wide range of use within products that have been developed and used since the 40s. It's hard to talk about PFAS when you have to deal with a customer. You want to say, what is it? Or someone's going to ask you, what is PFAS? So here, let's break this down a little bit. It's a chemical that's hard to pronounce, and there are between 9,000 and 15,000 variants of what we call PFAS. There are long chain versions and short chain versions. And so using the phrase PFAS may oftentimes be all that you need to know. And why do we just say, well, it's PFAS? Because this is some of the variations of the PFAS chemicals, but you want to, again, use PFAS sparingly. PFOA, PFOS, PFBA, PFHXS. A lot of them are extremely hard to say. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it for this industry. And so a lot of the times you'll just say it's PFAS. One that's listed on here that is not PFAS is this one right here, the aqueous film forming foam. It's firefighting foam, AFFF. Those are what you will hear it described as. While this is not a PFAS compound, it has used the PFAS compound as a key ingredient of it when it's been developed and when it's been used. So it is oftentimes seen as a direct contaminant source of PFAS. And here is two examples of it. They use it in firefighter training at military bases, large refineries, gas stations, anywhere that has these large dispersal systems have used aqueous film forming foams, or AFFF. A little bit about the compound themselves. Structurally, they are made of molecules containing carbon and fluorine atoms directly attached to one another, and these provide an extremely strong bond. I'm not going to get too far into the chemical analysis of these, but they have been split since the early 2000s into long versus short groups. Long chain PFAS were defined as substances having 6 or more carbons for the kind of chemicals called sulfonates, and 8 or more carbons for chemicals called carbolic acids. Short chains PFAS were defined as substances with 5 or fewer carbons for sulfonates and 7 or fewer carbons for carbolic acids. The chemical industry said that short chain PFAS were safer primarily because they tend to leave our bodies quicker. And the structural differences were a way for companies to avoid regulatory pressure directed at long chain PFAS. So people trying to do a workaround, so to speak. Remember, it's a family of between 9,000 and 15,000 man-made fluorinated organic chemicals. They are mobile, persistent, and in some cases, they are bioaccumulative. They are resistant to degradation in the environment, and when degradation does occur, it often results in the formation of another PFAS compound. Treatment and remediation is challenging, and right now, GAC, or granular activated carbon, has been most commonly applied during initial response actions and full-scale water treatment applications. Ion exchange resins is becoming better understood and has shown greater effectiveness compared to GAC in some studies. And for treatment of impacted soil media, excavation for disposal at a solid waste landfill or incineration has been the primary remediation alternative. And with all of these examples, keep in mind that new technology is always being developed and tested. The latest information indicates that fetuses and infants are very, very vulnerable to this. Long-term exposure to PFOA and PFOS leads to a buildup of these chemicals in women of childbearing age that result in more exposure to the fetus and breastfed infants. However, there are so many benefits to breastfeeding that Department of Health around the country recommend that women currently breastfeeding continue to plan and breastfeed because of all of the benefits outweigh the PFAS exposure. Bottle-fed infants are also of concern because they drink more water per body weight than adults. So if there is a concern with one of your customers about PFAS, about bottle feeding, about infants, using bottled water as a water source until you have a treatment system in place at that house would be the best way to do that. Some, if not all, but not all studies in humans with PFAS exposure have shown that certain PFAS can affect growth, learning, lower a woman's chance of getting pregnant, interfere with your body's natural hormones, increase cholesterol levels, affect the immune system, increase the risk of cancer. We're still learning about the health effects of exposures to mixtures of PFAS. For the most part, lab animals are exposed to high doses of one or more of these have shown changes in liver, thyroid, and pancreatic function, as well as, in some cases, the change to hormones. One thing that I have found in my talking with individuals is it's still very vague. I have yet to talk to a medical expert that says PFAS does, PFAS causes. A lot of it is PFAS may cause this. Again, I don't know if that's a HIPAA thing or where that would fall in there, but again, maintaining open communication and open dialogue is necessary. So what you need to learn, there is a difference with this, and that is something that you're going to want to know about, and hopefully I can share some more information with you on it. So how do you relate PFAS? We've talked a little bit about that. Again, remember it's 9,000 to 15,000 variations, but you're starting at 4 parts per trillion. Great. Thanks, Dave. How do we relate 4 parts per trillion to the little old lady that I'm putting a new well in who thinks she has PFAS? So we're going to do a little quiz, and this is just for fun, of course. No one's being graded, but some time for some PFAS math. 1 part per trillion equals 1 inch in 16 million miles. That's 600 times around the Earth. Keep in mind the sun is 94 million miles from Earth. So 4 parts per trillion would equal 4 inches out of 64 million miles. That's 2,560 times around the Earth, or over halfway to the sun. That's 4 parts per trillion. Let's look at it another way. 1 part per trillion is equivalent to a single drop of water in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's what people are saying is the threshold, 4 parts per trillion. Again, there's a lot of this that I'll say is keep in mind, understand, consider. Testing standards and capabilities continue to evolve. Administrations continue to come and go, change, regulate, deregulate, etc. So why should we care? Why do we even care that we're sitting here? Why does Dave care about PFAS? And we'll talk about that. One reason is because you are groundwater professionals. When the supply of quality groundwater, which is our livelihood, becomes contaminated, it's you and your association and your fellow professionals that are looked to provide answers and resources, especially when it's in your neighborhood. You're going to want to know more. Your neighbors know that you're the local groundwater contractor, the professional. And if something comes up, they may or they will look to you for an answer. More than 15.9 million water wells for all purposes serve the U.S. About 500,000 new residential wells are constructed annually, according to NGWA estimates. And private wells, household wells, constitute the largest share of all water wells in the U.S., with more than 13.135 million year-round occupied households having their own well. This is why you should care. As many as 350,000 water wells tap Oregon's groundwater supply alone, and 400 state observation wells are handled in Oregon. Now, I know that's across the country from where you are, but this is just an example. So again, Dave, dude, why do we care? Because I'm going to tell you a story, and this is why I care. This is a map of Michigan, and you can see that this is dated 2022. So 3 years ago, these are the known PFAS sites that exceed their Part 201 criteria. Anybody recognize where that is in the lower mitten? Give you a second, use your geography. That's Flint. And I'm not going to talk about the Flint debacle or the Flint water concerns that happened a few years ago during COVID. But what I do want to share is this one back here. Dude, why do you care? This is why I care. I grew up right there. I grew up in the 70s in Flint, and I played in local streams that ran through my neighborhood in Flint. This is why I care. This right here is South Washington County, Minnesota. This is where I live right here. As you can see, right to the right of that, about 1.5 miles away, is 3M Cottage Grove plant. And I don't think I can get my cursor to show the dot, but you'll see also throughout this area, disposal sites. And if you look on here, you'll see the direction of groundwater flow. All of the aquifers in South Washington County are contaminated with PFAS. And it's going into the St. Croix River to the east and the Mississippi River to the south of where I live. This is why I care. It's in my backyard. Okay, so as a contractor, what do you need to understand about PFAS? You need to know where it is, what it is, how tests are conducted, who can test for it. Can the private water system you're working on even be treated? If it can be treated, how? What are the types that are available? What kind of aftercare are you as a professional providing? Understanding this is key. It's a contaminant different from others you've seen or worked for. There are long chains that are bioaccumulate in the human body over decades and may take many years to leave the body after exposure stops. This is why it's called the forever chemical. It doesn't go away. PFAS can occur in sources of food, drinking water, dust, on articles that you wear, whether it's clothing or furniture. We do know that it's not well absorbed directly through the skin, but little is known about inhalation exposure. If you remember earlier, I shared that its testing is always being done. There's limited data for the health harms associated with long-chain PFAS, such as immune system effects. And where the data is available, multiple short-chain PFAS appear to behave much like long-chain counterparts. Long and short chain can contaminate the soil and have been found in vegetables, which can absorb PFAS from areas where they're grown. They have found PFAS in polar bears. They have found it in honey. So I'll stop and think about where polar bears are and how honey is produced. There have been numerous studies that indicate that short chain PFAS exhibit toxicity impacts similar to those of long chain. Okay. Talking about immunosuppression, reproductive and developmental toxicity, thyroid issues. Short chain PFAS are as persistent in the environment as long chain. And regulation of PFAS as a class, including short and long chain, is the policy approach that best protects our health. So, common question that I've had is it a sinker or a floater contaminant? Guess what? It's neither. As they usually not a non-aqueous fluid. They dissolve into water, but are a concern at super low concentrations. Remember, 4 parts per trillion. Molecules of PFAS are polar and they dissolve in the water. And if there are enough PFAS molecules, they behave like a surfactant and form clusters. So what resources do you have as a contractor that you can provide to your customers? Well, that's information on laboratories, where to go, either the state or the local level if a positive water test is returned. And you also want to share what your state association is doing on their behalf. Talked about tools. Knowledge is the tool. Correct filters for the job, disposal, how to be a liaison so the entire industry and an association understands and can work together. You want to have handouts. These are available from state agency, the NGWA, EPA, Water Systems Council, and you can also find information with a Google search. And I put that in there and offer a bit of caution as you don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole on Google. Again, tools, knowing the well depth, what available aquifers are still good, the geology, hydrology, as well as knowing the treatments. You want to follow up and test the well often. Don't overgeneralize the term PFAS and continue to educate yourself as well. If a customer has an impacted well, choose a treatment option. Insist that they obtain a service plan and ensure their well and system is properly serviced. Be proactive with this. Stay engaged with your peers and openly communicate. Remember, you are the groundwater professional and knowledge is your weapon. Get involved, learn, and do not become complacent on PFAS. Do your research, do outreach, interact with your local state agency or your local government, whether it's a city or a county, and continue to educate and learn about PFAS. You are the water well professional. You have to know about hydrology and state testing, geology, plumbing, learn about PFAS, understand it, get to know it. It's not going anywhere. So if you're working in a PFAS contaminated area, I want to do this a little quick. There are some considerations that you're going to want to take into account as you start going into this, but you're also going to want to look with local, state, and federal regulations about working in a PFAS area. What precautions need to be taken, whether you can transfer PFAS from one place to another. What if there, if any, are there legal ramifications? If you now all of a sudden have PFAS show up at Mrs. Smith's house because you just left Mr. Johnson's house and you brought PFAS from one to the other, what legal ramifications are there now? Have you contaminated a full aquifer? Things that you need to consider, because I honestly don't have the answer from that. What do you need to know about doing a water test? You all know that you have to do a water test for things such as lead, arsenic, bacteria in a specific way. You don't just grab a bottle you found out in the field somewhere. Same with PFAS. Some of the things that we wear and use may or may not contain PFAS, but there's something that you should be considering. Steel-toed boots, clothing, rain gear, gloves. There is a PFAS concern on all of those, but there are also approved alternatives with it. Again, proactive or protective clothing, sunblock, insects repellent, food and drink, and your morning cosmetic routine. Again, may all have a PFAS concern, but there are approved alternatives when you do this. Talking about food and drink, don't be brought on site except for bottled water or hydration drinks. Don't use blue ice packs. Additionally, hands should be thoroughly washed following consumption of any wrapped fast food or pizza. Again, these are all things that you want to keep in mind and understand when you're dealing with PFAS in a PFAS contaminated area. So some things to remember: treatment options are limited due to the unique physical chemical properties. Air stripping, disparaging, and biotreatment are ineffective for PFAS, PFOA, and PFOA, and OS, I'm sorry, due to their low volatility and resistance to microbial degradation. Chemical reduction shows some process, but there's more research needed, and there is an incredibly strong CF bond with these chemicals. Treatment technologies: GAC, ion exchange resins, and reverse osmosis. Those are the ones that are currently showing the most effectiveness when treating PFAS in a city well, private well, in a poet, that kind of thing. No single treatment technologies been identified that can treat all PFASs. So you may have to talk about or understand a combination of reverse osmosis and a GAC filter or something like that. Some that may work in one area as a treatment may not work in another due to different water chemistry. So some FAQs when you're talking about testing. Testing can be done only by certified laboratories, and the list of these is going to vary by state. The EPA continues to update their list, so you want to check with the EPA often, but also the state agency that oversees contaminants within your state. There's going to be a variation of costs, and that's going to depend on a lot of different factors. They can be expensive, and the process is time consuming due to the number of limited labs. That price is going to be a few $100s to a lot more. I don't have a general consensus as a PFAS test is going to cost you X. They're going to vary. That's the only way to explain that. So EPA certified labs in Virginia or nearby that can test for compounds. Found this off the EPA website. So there's a couple right here on your screen, and I'm going to go a little slow. We can get this information to you after the fact, and we will be more than willing to help you with that. Yeah, that's it right there. Maryland and one in Richmond. So there you go. Those are the two EPA certified labs in Virginia or nearby that can test for PFAS. Treatment. Remember, it can be treated. In home, you want to use a poet. Treat the whole thing. Don't just say, oh, go out and buy a couple of, what are they, Pure or I can't remember the other brand name, to put on your sink, or just take all your water through a water pitcher. Suggest a poet. Schedule maintenance for it. Their cost: whole house GAC filter between $1,000 to $5,000, and with yearly maintenance. It is check your resources, call your supplier, see what they have, because that's just a variable. Again, with your costs increase, filter costs are going to increase, treatment costs are going to increase. There may be state or federal funds available for remediation and treatment. GAC filters may be seen in some areas as a natural source of arsenic. So even though they fix PFAS, they can and could cause other problems as well. So a couple images. These are GAC filters. The one on the left, that's a poet at a house that I know. On the right, that's on a city well, and there's about 12 of those large filters on one city well system. There is some treatment for PFOS, ion exchange resins, high pressure membranes, GAC filters. Those are all showing some promise, but again, all of this is subject to change. There is technology that uses electricity. A company called Clarity is able to have some success in removing the PFAS contaminant by using electricity. Minnesota is the first state government in the U.S. to use a combination of innovative technologies to address forever chemicals with a surface activated foam fractionation. Talk about PFAS long enough, it does get to be a tongue twister. Again, as we talked, you'll see this at state shows as well as Groundwater Week. Talk to your suppliers, talk to your water treatment professionals about what it is that they have to treat PFAS in the house. learn what those costs are. And these are just examples of flyers that I have seen through my research that can talk about PFAS treatment. Other questions that have come up in the past about PFAS and what consumers may need answers to. And these are actual questions that contractors have shared with me. When is this going to end? Remember, it's a forever chemical. What are state and federal regulations regarding PFAS in my private water system? Remember, these are going to vary from state to state and region to region. Some states haven't even tested for it. Is the municipal water safe? It's a tough question because you're going to want to understand this as you have that discussion, because it may be that long pipe is the only way to give that individual safe potable water. What happens to the charcoal filter when it's replaced? Well, it can be reactivated in multiple hearth furnaces reaching temps above 1400 degrees centigrade. Emissions from that process are controlled using negative pressure, afterburners, chemical scrubbers, and a final filter process. That reactivated carbon, which originally was used in food grade applications, can once again be used in the same manner. How else can you dispose of PFAS? Well, there are some deep injection wells for class 1 that are limited to liquid waste streams only. There are permitted hazardous waste landfills. Those are highly environmentally regulated. Solid waste landfills with composite liners with leachate collection and treatment systems. Hazardous waste combustors, there's about 10 of them. 11 hazardous waste incinerators in the US, 10 commercial. And other thermal incinerators for sewage sludge and other thermal oxidizers. So for the state, your state association, you may notice this about PFAS in your community or the state. Sometimes it's like this: calm, quiet, nobody's talking about PFAS. We don't have to understand it. We don't need to know about it. Or it's going to be like that. Anybody ever seen a litter of German short-haired pointers eating? It's utter chaos. That's our job right there, is to figure out the strategy and implementation and how to make that fit out of this. That's chaos. We don't have to, we have all this information coming at us, and it's our job to straighten it out. Figure out what it is that has to be relayed to you, the professional. Okay. We have to make sure we maintain a presence at the legislative level, be it the federal level or the state level. Get involved, speak up, understand what the PFAS levels are being reviewed as. Okay. Understand what your agencies are requesting for your state levels. Do you know what they are? Are these levels based on science or just on, let's do better than our rival state? It's kind of like the Michigan-Ohio rivalry. Oh, we can do better than the Buckeyes if we were a Wolverine. Or if you're a Packer, we got to do better than the Vikings. That kind of thing. Be proactive. Talk to your representatives and your senators that are in those affected areas. How many of you understand, know, work for, friends with an elected official? Talk to them. Let them know, remind them that you are the groundwater professional. And if anything related to groundwater or PFAS comes up, you want to be called. I will let you know the information. Okay. Monitor bill introductions and work with a legislative committee or lobbyist and react appropriately to those. Understanding of the PFAS from your association levels, you need to know how it's going to affect your members, what the association needs to do, how prevalent is PFAS in your state. Ask someone to be a liaison with the agency and the association when it comes to PFAS. As an association, same thing. As a contractor, what you need to know. Where is it? What is it? Getting the members the information they need for their customers. Get involved. Don't become complacent on PFAS. Use social media, and that can help you communicate effectively as well. A lot of the times you will see, or somebody in your office will monitor, I think that one's Snapchat, Facebook, the old Twitter, which is now X, monitor those sites that talk about local community groups. Step up. You're the groundwater professional. Set people right. Don't get into too deep with social media arguments, but it can be used effectively. Staying in touch is key, not just with your association, but with your community as well. So you will see headlines across your community, across the country, from other states about PFAS. So 2 states have become the first in the US to ban the use of PFAS in firefighters' protective gear. PFAS litigation is heating up as the state hires a private law firm. PFAS roundup, Wisconsin PFAS remediation funds still frozen due to a partisan divide. The EPA awarded $1.5 million to Clarkson University for research and development. Platypuses in Australia show alarming PFAS contamination. Here's one. Are you putting PFAS on your eyeballs? Become involved at your state capitol. That's the only thing I can say. When you're involved with your state capitol, how many of you have seen this before? It's a great hydrologic cycle poster that you can order, you can buy, you can use, you can see variations of this. Put your association sticker on it. Share it with those individuals that are elected officials, teachers, leave behinds, whatever you want to call it. But it's a way to brand your association, your company, that you are the groundwater professional. If they have questions, they come to you. Still not sure if you should care? Let's talk a little bit more. Want to share a story about, remember where I live, where I grew up in Minnesota. That's where I currently live. In 2018, the state of Minnesota settled a lawsuit with 3M in return for $850 million. The Attorney General sued 3M in 2010, alleging that the company's production of chemicals known as PFAS had damaged drinking water and natural resources in the Twin Cities metro area. So after all said and done, $720 million are going to be invested in drinking water and natural resources in the Twin Cities East metropolitan region. I've accented a couple of words in there that you may have caught because they become relevant. Part of this community that was engaged went through 80 plus work group and public meetings, 330 or more public comments, letters from community and organizations and work group members. Get involved. And I don't want to point it out, but or toot my own horn, however you want to say it. That's the way I maintained recognition and involvement. Was I got involved at my community level with this, not only because I live in this affected area, but I'm also the executive director for the Minnesota Waterwell Association. I'm a groundwater professional. I need to make sure that potable water is addressed and in a safe way. So talking about the final plan is you have settlement funds that are covered. And if the funds are depleted, there's the consent order funds that go in perpetuity. So you're looking at wells with health advisory levels and wells without a health advisory level. Okay, so these are going above health indexes of 1 or above. And what is it that you do and where is it that you've got funds available? This is Washington County in the Twin Cities. So it's not a small county. And if you look to where the word Oakdale is, about halfway up, from Oakdale south is where this $720 million is to be used at. You cross that major intersection of I-94 north, they don't get anything. It's just the south part of Washington County in the East Metro that $720 million can be used. So now you've narrowed it down to only about 12 communities. And how do you deal with the effective disbursement of that funds for those individuals? Through a lot of meetings, everything came down to this work group developing a water plan. And I'm going to share with you some slides, but I want to point out a couple of things. These are really the communities that you're talking about: Maplewood, Oakdale, Lake Elmo, West Lakeland, Lakeland Shores, Afton, Woodbury, part of the Prairie Island Indian Reservation, Newport, St. Paul Park, a township, Cottage Grove, and Denmark Township. In all of these, on the left-hand side, ladies and gentlemen, this says supply private wells with POETs if they're over the threshold. And as I go through this, you'll take a look at all of these communities. They all say, well, yes, you can interconnect with a well, or you can build a new treatment center. That's where some of these funds will go. Supply other private wells with POETs if over the threshold. And I guarantee that if I had not been involved with this and advocating for our industry and advocating for the private water user, no one would have thought about putting money aside to supply other private wells with POETs if over the threshold. Every one of these has got that information in there, with the exception of the Prairie Island Indian community, because it's basically a corner of part of the highway of the land that they own. There's nobody that lives there. Some other information. So again, sorry, go back and talk about West or the East Metro, the south part of Washington County. This is the area right here of that large county that only gets these funds. Anywhere else in the state of Minnesota, Wisconsin that borders it, nothing. They get nothing. Got to figure it out on your own. So there have been some other lawsuits that have come through. DuPont, Chemours, Corteva have paid Delaware millions over damage for PFAS or forever chemicals. There's a settlement announced on a Tuesday afternoon that will result in a guaranteed $50 million to Delaware to be paid immediately. Okay, companies will fund up to an additional $25 million if they settle similar claims with other states for more than $50 million. I'm not saying that these are insignificant, but I'm saying that that is going to go quick because each of these different communities are going to want to grab a part of that for future expansion. How can they use that for a new well, a treatment for a well? Advocate for your contractors, advocate for your landowners, the private well users. They're going to need your assistance and they're going to need your voice. Okay. So again, I wanted to share some information with you about other states, about other lawsuits. That's what's going to end up happening, is the only way that they're going to get that money. The only way that outstate Minnesota would get it, outside that South Washington metro, is to file a lawsuit or to raise it on their own to tap their citizens, to increase taxes, that kind of thing. Cancer endpoints, things to know. PFOA is likely to be a carcinogen. PFOS is likely to be a carcinogen. Again, likely, may, might. So as we wind down, we have some key takeaways, ladies and gentlemen. Regulatorily, in regulations, there's uncertainty. Between 9,000 and 15,000 PFAS chemicals in the environment, possibly more. Government hasn't figured out how to regulate all of them. And only a very, very small percentage of PFAS are being addressed in the US. Only a small percentage of them can even be tested for. There are a few treatment options in water. Granular activated carbon works in some areas, but not universal. Reverse osmosis or nanofiltration, ion exchange resins, they work, but again, not in all areas, not universal. But there is always new technology being researched and developed. You can incinerate it. There are a few places to dispose of common treatment media. You can put it in the landfill, but again, that's going to be highly regulated. And in some instances, only liquid waste could be put into deep wells. As a groundwater professional, I urge you to get involved. Step up as a citizen in affected areas. Step up as a groundwater professional. Step up as a member of your association. So some other questions you may hear, you may have heard, you may end up being asked. I'm not in a contaminated zone, but I'm close to it. Should I get my water tested? If so, who's going to pay for the water test? Isn't this just a problem of the week? Why don't they just buy my house? The filters they put in my house knock the pressure down. Why can't they put in a bigger pump? Everything was working pretty well. Can't I just opt out of this whole mess? I'll take my chances. Can I replace my well if it goes bad? Is my property and my health, how can they stop me from putting in a well? Well, will PFAS hurt me if it's used for laundry or bathing, etc.? Why can't they just give us bottled water for drinking and keep the well for everything else? This last question, I want to share with you a comment as I went through all of those meetings. I asked basically the same thing. Part of what the state wanted to do was to say for Minnesotans in my neighborhood area, um, you can use your septic, you can keep that. We're going to provide you with straight pipe with treated water from the utility. But if you have a well that you want to use for irrigation, a large garden, if you've got some land or whatever, you cannot keep it. And I asked, why not? And they said, well, they're afraid somebody's going to go up and put their mouth on the hose and drink directly from it. Okay, why not put a POET unit, a treatment unit on that well and keep it for irrigation? So some information close to home. I took that original map at the very beginning and I zoomed in. So here's where PFAS has been found in Virginia, West Virginia, the DC area, a little bit of Delaware and Maryland. As you can see by those dots, where that information has been found. And when you go to the map that has this information, you can see what the contaminant source is, what the parts per trillion is, and information such as that. The DEQ, Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, that's going to be a great state resource for you to reach out to. And your state's PFAS activities, they did address some of it in some of the General Assembly sessions, appropriating funds, creating a couple of House bills in the Assembly, and so forth. So I would urge you and your association to look up this information and become familiar with it and see how relevant it is. See if it's gone too far, if it needs to be addressed, get involved. The Department of Health, again, has a website where you can talk about US EPA National Primary Drinking Water Regulations for PFAS in drinking water, and where that information is. Whether it's been updated from this slide or not, I do not know. I'll be honest with you. But there is information that you can find specifically for the state of Virginia. So that kind of wraps it up. As you can see, this has not been just one individual that has started to talk about PFAS. I have talked about this for a number of states. There have been a number of individuals that have helped me with this, from state agencies to national professionals as well. So thank you very much for your time today. I will be happy to entertain any questions that you want to have sent to me. There's my email right there. You can call me at that extension and get a hold of me. Again, I wish you the best. Enjoy the rest of your time. And again, thank you very much for allowing me to be part of your day.